Hey everyone, welcome back to Talking Cardboard. In this episode, we are going to be re-reviewing a game that we first looked at 3.5 years ago, way back at the infant stages of this channel, and that game is Root. Thank you for joining us for this video. As always, if you like what you see, if you're indifferent about what you see, if you don't really like what you see, we'll still take the likes and subscribe, so click down below. We are shameless in that respect. As always, I've got John to my right, I'm Jerch, and then Corey to my left. So Corey, why are we reviewing Root again when we did a perfect job the first time through?
I think it deserves another opportunity, or it did deserve another opportunity, a revisit of the game. It was back in more of the infant stages of the channel, back when we were first starting to play more complicated games, and I think it deserved a revisit. And I know Root is a game that has been resurfacing more recently with a lot of other games that are kind of older, like another resurgence was in Spirit Island. I know when that first came out, it was really complicated, complex. A lot of people dismissed it and are now coming back to it and finding out how great of a game it is. And I saw a little bit of that in Root and wanted to revisit it.
Excellent. And since our first review of this, there have been multiple expansions that have come out. John, do you want to touch on those expansions?
Yeah, obviously the base game Root had just the 4 factions, the Marquise de Cat, the Eerie, the Vagabond, and the Woodland Alliance. But the expansions that came out were the Riverfolk expansion and the Underground expansion, and that added 2 factions with each expansion, the Moles, the Crow Guys, I don't know, remember all the names now, unfortunately.
Lizards and...
the Lizard Cult.
And
another Vagabond.
and
the Otters.
And the Otters. Someone's favorite.
And don't forget the Clockwork expansion.
Yes, there is also the Clockwork expansion, which adds a cooperative component to the game. There are also 2, mini expansions. One just gives you a different deck of cards to use during the game, and then the other one kind of adds some new versions of the Vagabond, as well as some new meeples to go with the Vagabond. So
there's been quite
a lot
added to this game, and I think the most important thing is the addition of more factions.
Yep.
I think that was one of our biggest critiques the first time through. But now with all these other factions, there's so much more dynamic interaction that can be happening with this game. And I think that is a huge pro. It's also, as we get into dissecting this game more, that it's also going to be a con for me. But just there is so much more flavor to this now just by adding more factions. So there's much more different dynamic interactions. So Corey, what is one of your biggest pros to Root now?
My biggest pro after tabling the game a lot more recently and just getting to really dive into it is just the fact that it doesn't feel like any other game on the market. It really does not. It is extremely asymmetric. It is one that can grow with multiple plays. You can get better and better at with multiple plays. And you can also dive into the different factions, and each different faction you dive into, it feels like a completely different game. So I think for me that is the biggest pro, is just the amount of exploration you can do with the different factions here.
It really is that this is the definition of asymmetric, that with each new faction, you have to learn how to play a new game. And then in addition to that, you have to learn how everybody else is playing their game to kind of interact with all of it. And it is so many different games just within one game. John, what's your biggest pro of Root 3.5 years later?
There are a lot of cool things with this game. I think one thing we should point out is this is published by Letter Games, which is based in Minnesota, so it's local to us, and that's pretty cool. So gotta support them.
The designer's local too. Cole
yes,
Worley.
Yep. Everyone involved here local, so really cool. Again, back in the day when we first reviewed this, I think the asymmetric nature is probably what brought it over the edge. There was too much to learn all at once. This time when we got it to the table, a couple people learned it, through a couple playthroughs, then brought it to a couple more of us, and we've kind of gradually learned the game with some knowledge base there, and the asymmetric nature of the factions is just so cool to try to figure it out. How is this faction supposed to work and do its thing in order to win? I like to. I think I've played 3 of the factions now, and I can't wait to try more. That's a cool part of it. Like, I'm excited to either A, take a faction I already took and try to do better, or B, take a faction someone else played and be like, okay, now how is this going to work, and how do I stop the faction that I was just playing as? Yeah. So, with the expansions, and now there being 8 different factions you can play as, there's just so much replayability to this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of probably going to be the calling card for Root, is just that. Were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that for me too, I know a lot of people say that this game is a war game disguised as kind of a more cutesy woodland creature type game, it's not that. It's really a war game at its heart, and I don't necessarily feel that as much with this. I don't know if I'm not going to speak for you guys. I don't know if you guys feel like this is a war game, but for me, coming from more of a mechanics-driven, Euro-style game-driven background, I like the fact that it feels more like a puzzle. It feels like the asymmetric faction that is thrown in front of you at the beginning of the game is a new puzzle for you to solve. And yeah, I mean, how are you going to manipulate that puzzle amongst all the other factions on the board? But for me, I love that puzzly aspect to each faction.
Well, I guess I want to draw a distinction. One thing that we've done this time, as opposed to when we were first learning how to play Root, is this time through, we had a game plan that we each were just going to try a couple of factions.
Yeah.
Last time we were all trying to just learn how to play the game, but now I know that you've been the Vagabond multiple times in a row with playing this, and for me, I've been the Otters a couple of times in a row playing this, and we just finished up a 6-player game, and it didn't go much faster than what a 4-player one.
No.
That was incredible. We had a 6-player game going, and it was engaging, and a lot was going on, and there's a lot of push and pull, and the board was super busy, but it didn't seem like it took a lot longer than if it was 4 players. And I think part of that is we had the idea that we were each going to learn a few factions instead of everybody trying to learn this game. So then once you have a few that you go to, sure, then that kind of compartmentalizes your Root experience over, your multiple playthroughs, but then it breaks it down into bite-sized chunks. And I know for me, somebody who struggles to learn games quite as fast as others, but being able to just focus on 1 or 2 over the course of multiple playthroughs, then I start to get comfortable and understand them. And like you said, is finding multiple ways to kind of win or get better with your faction. I think that's an important mindset with this game that we didn't have the first time through.
No. And don't let anybody fool you. It is definitely a game that's more rewarding with more plays, with the same people, more teetering the line between a lifestyle game where you're going to need to bring it to the table quite often to get the full experience out of it. But if that's a game you're looking for, then that's definitely a pro. If you have a few staples in your collection that hit the table a few times a year, this is definitely one that is rewarding with more plays.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because when we first played this, we played it twice, shelved it, done.
Yeah.
Sold it, got rid of it. We had the intention last weekend to do a live playthrough of this and Ankh, and ended up just playing Root.
Yep.
And then 2 days later, I went out and bought the base game, all the expansions, and now this weekend, we also pretty much just played more Root.
Yep.
So that says a lot for the game that we've had such this big turnaround, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, but I don't think that our first review that we should take anything away from that, because we didn't do anything wrong. That was our experience with it, and we had the caveats
at the time with who we were as gamers. Like, it was too much. Yeah, and it didn't really fit our play style. So.
Yeah, but we also, like, all those were caveats for it that we said, if this is your type of play style, we weren't seeing the level of interaction that we were having, but the fact that we were coming at it with a different mindset now and a deeper vocabulary of games and experiences that, we could mentally handle it last time through, and we gave it a fair review. It's just now we're coming at it with a different mindset, and the fact that, you had some people that were much more excited to play it, and then now you have some people that are much more excited to play it.
Yeah, that helps.
Instead of all of us just trying to learn and kind of, stumble our way through it. Yeah. We've got experience and now other people that are new to be wanting to play this game, and it's just changing the atmosphere behind all of it.
Yeah, in a few hours of research behind the revisit to this game, I know my brother spent a few hours learning the rules. There's a lot of little nuances to it. There's still rules that you forget even after a couple plays
Right.
that you have
Yep.
to revisit and correct. So, take that with a grain of salt. It definitely is a beast of a game that you do need to learn, and you're going to play wrong the first couple of times. You just have to be okay with that. And I think the first time we weren't okay with it. And like I said in one of the other videos, if you saw it, that I just came out with, that said, where has Talking Cardboard been lately? It was kind of an update video for the channel here. I did mention Root in it, and I said that, I did say in that video that our first review of it, it's not invalid based on those opinions. I think it's more of like see how more of a beginner style gamer might view Root, and now you're viewing it as a more experienced players might view it.
Yeah, and before we transition on, I want to mention my most pro, probably the biggest pro I have of any game I've ever played. In Root. Oh, you know it's coming.
Wow.
It's the Otter faction. Oh my gosh. Just, they're so adorable. And so the way that the Otter plays is they're kind of a market for everybody else. So where some factions are warring against each other, some factions are trying to like go around and trade items, which, you may or may not want to actually make that trade, but you kind of have to. The Otters, they're trying to sell the cards in their hand. They're trying to sell their services as mercenaries. They're trying to sell fast paths down the river. Like, they just want to be your friends and sell you stuff. And it's so much fun, and I love being able to change the market each round and kind of see where everybody else is. And that faction has such interconnectivity with everybody else. I just love it.
And that gets at another big pro of this game for me, and I think this is even on the box where it kind of mentions this, but the theme of this game is actually really great. I mean, you do have this cutesy art of the woodland creatures, but like Corey said, it is kind of a war game, everyone's fighting, but it reminds me a lot of the Redwall book series that I read growing up. And
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else here has read it,
Yeah.
but I was obsessed with those books as a kid, and this really brings that into the spotlight as you're, playing as the otters and the moles, the cats, everything, just everything. The theme's just so good, and the factions play as I would picture them to
Yeah.
me. Like, the otters are all about staying on the river and trading, and the cats are these industrialists.
Yep, and
people
the
trying
birds
to
are able
keep
to move a
control of
lot,
everything,
and they've
yes.
got their So it's
Yeah.
really well done, and it's a combat game without it having to be war. Like you're
Right.
killing or you're making nukes, or like it doesn't have to be that
Right.
theme in order to get that gameplay idea from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really good experience.
Another cool thing is, like, all the new players, they might not know what they're doing at the beginning, but I've never seen them out of the race to win the game. Like, just the way the game plays, you're always kind of in this to some extent.
Yeah, and
So-
we had, how many different people had those alternate win conditions?
Oh, the dominance.
The
cards,
dominance?
Yes.
Yeah, so when we were playing 6-player, I think at like 3 people had dominance cards.
Yeah.
Right, and then we had them all
couple of
vying
people-
for what they're trying to control.
And the other,
so
and the other
no one
three
could
were
win.
all
Really
high
close.
up there at the VP.
Yep.
Yep.
So everybody had a chance, and it was a really cool kind of rat race at the end, and,
Yep.
and a lot of push and pull. And I think this game scales a lot better the more people you're getting into it.
Yep.
I've played this game at 2, 3, 4, and now 6. So I've played it a widespread. I think at 2 and 3, it's definitely not as good as at 4
Right.
and 6, or I imagine 5 would be. 2 and 3 feels like more of a throw this faction down, let's see how it plays, so I can kind of learn the faction for when we do have a higher player count. But at 4, 5, 6, holy cow! I mean, the interaction, the interactivity, everybody doing their own thing, it just feels so congested, yet not congested all at the same time on
Yep.
the map.
Right.
In terms of cons, I'm probably going to be kind of on an island on this. But like I mentioned, it's harder for me to be learning games, for me to kind of pick up on what I'm supposed to do, learn the ins and the outs. And a game like Root, you're not able to look at the person your left or right and see what they're doing and get some kind of intel on, oh, I can do this type of movement, or oh, this seems like it's a strategy that's kind of working, so I can be learning and then coming up with my own ideas. You're completely on an island. And you can't even really be asking anybody for help, or hey, did I do this right? Well, I don't know, because I'm setting up all these cards in this tableau in front of me. And then your job is to be putting tokens out to be doing X, Y, and Z. So that's still really overwhelming. And after each playthrough of this, I feel like I need to take a nap because it's so mentally taxing. And that was an issue that we all kind of had going into it the first time. But with the mindset now of we only got to learn 2 factions or 3 and then try to really explore those, that takes a lot of the stress off of me is, I mean, I've played the Otters, so then don't have to learn how to play it now.
Yeah.
And now that I've seen a lot of these other ones played again, I don't have to learn what you're doing, so then I could kind of work with that or against that type of thing. But that is still a really tough pill for me to swallow. And that's why it's difficult for me to play Root more than 1 or 2 times in a row without taking like a filler break or a stand up and stretch type of thing. Because it's very mentally taxing when you are playing your own game and then you've got everybody else playing their own games and then trying to figure out how to succeed and do well and win and all that when there's just so much mentally going on. And for me, that's a personal struggle. But when you are able to kind of break it down, it does make it much more manageable.
No, and I could see that as being a con for a lot of people. I think the best analogy that I can think of is that where most games is kind of like a motor yacht or a motor boat, this game feels more like a sailboat. Like when the wind is strong, you can put the sails down a little bit. When the wind is weaker, put the sails up. Oh, the wind is changing directions, you have to kind of turn the sail and that sort of thing. There's just a lot more to this game where, and what I mean by that is you might know what the Otter's selling, so I kind of really want to grab at that, and hey, are you planning on crafting potentially this item that I need? I'm the Vagabond and I could really use a hammer right about now. You do have that? Are you going to craft that? Okay, so I'm kind of paying attention to 2 players. All in the meanwhile, the other players I don't really care as much about, but I can kind of see, I know the factions now to where I know what their win conditions are, or kind of what their main strategy is, so I can see when to get my hand in the pot and kind of stir things up a little bit so they're not as strong as they could be and they don't become a runaway leader and things. But it is definitely kind of know when to put the sails down, know when to put the sails up, know when to do and shift and do different things with your table talk and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I get that, and I don't necessarily derive my enjoyment of a game from winning. But it is that kind of nuanced feel experience, but you have to have the head knowledge that goes all with it. And if it was me and a bunch of other slow learners trying to do it, then this game wouldn't get off the ground, or it wouldn't, get out of port, if you will.
But that puzzle is what's fun for me. I have fun with this whether or not I win. I don't know if I've ever really won at it, but the puzzle and trying to figure out what everybody's doing and what you're doing, and that puzzle is what's fun to me. I could have fun every time and never win.
Well, that's good, because you won't. Especially if I get to play the
But I still
others.
had a chance.
Yeah.
Any cons for you, John?
Honestly, my cons are probably similar to what they were 3.5 years ago, although the con now isn't as severe as it probably was, and that's the learning curve to this. With the asymmetrical nature, like very asymmetrical nature, it's difficult probably for newer players to pick up and learn this, and luckily we mitigated that this time by having a few people learn the game as we went instead of just having all new players. But that's still probably the biggest con, is you really need to get your head into this game, follow through with a couple playthroughs to really understand what's going on here.
I did kind of feel bad for a couple of the newer players when we were more experienced.
Right.
When maybe 4 out of the 6 of us were more experienced, I felt kind of bad for the other 2. But they were still in it, but at the same time, you kind of felt like, oh, should I really be doing this? Because they don't really understand the full extent of what I'm about to do here.
Yeah, but you're not punishing them for being new. You just had more experience.
No,
with what
but you
you're trying.
could. I mean, you could overprice cards and have the new player buy a card from you for an overpriced amount.
You could.
If you were the Otters, let's say.
If you were, but I didn't.
Okay.
It was priced highly. It was a good card, and it helped him.
How high can you price it? What's the max? 5?
The max is 4.
4? Okay.
Yeah.
How much were those cards in the beginning?
4.
4.
Okay. My point.
That was the market. That was a market.
That's going to be a con for the game. And like John said, 3.5 years ago, we said the same thing. What is it? Barrier to entry, high barrier to entry, high learning curve. You need the same players, not only learning the game, but learning multiple factions to fully understand everything. But it is very highly rewarding if you can get past those 4, 5, 6 different things.
Yeah.
Probably not the first board game you want to buy unless you are someone that commits to things and follow through even when it seems difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, this game required people to do homework. And it's not a pro or a con. It's just, managing your expectations for it.
Yeah.
And we didn't before because we didn't know. So, I mean, even when we pulled it out just a few weeks ago, when we started playing it again, it took me, I think it was 15 minutes from when here's your faction to before we were ready to start
Just
playing.
to set it up, yeah, and
To set
understand
it
what
up,
you're trying to
to
do.
read the back, to then start setting up the front, to then go back and read the back, to understand, to get a feeling of what your goals were going to be, and then what you could do on your turn, and then try to ask for help. And before the game even started, it took me 15 minutes.
A lot of
Yeah.
rule book
Heck, we
referencing
sent
too.
Corey to go get energy drinks while we were setting up our second game and showing new people how their faction worked.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a little upfront setup and preparation to this mentally.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else we're missing on this with this re-review? No.
think
So let's
so.
go into our final scoring, and as always, we go with the BoardGameGeek.com 1 to 10 rating on this. So if you're really into the number side of things, you can go there to see what each of the ratings pretty much mean. But John, kick us off with your rating, your re-review of Root.
Honestly, this is quite the change. Probably the biggest turnaround I've ever seen in a game. I'm going to go with a 9.5. We played this 4 or 5 times in 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
I mean, we've put everything else aside to keep playing this, even though we've had plans to review other things.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
I mean, that says a lot about it. I don't see that going down. I only see that going up still, from what I can tell, as they add more factions or I get more involved in some of the other factions. But like I said, I ran out and bought everything I could for this. So
Do you remember what your original rating was for it?
I can't imagine it was higher than a 5. So,
Probably around there.
but you
don't
can
think-
check the link below to find the video from 3.5 years ago.
Brilliant. I don't think I'm going to be able to keep up with all the different character voices for all these factions now.
Gonna
You
be
were doing
hard.
pretty well at that, yeah.
Well, when it was the Otters, when I got into it, and so for me, my rating is going to be lower. I'm going to give this like an 8. And as I learn more factions and really feel comfortable with them and probably find their voice, both like characteristically and then stylistically, that this will probably go up to an 8.5 or a 9.
Right.
But I still am a little intimidated by really getting familiar and acquainted and comfortable with all these different factions and play styles and all that thing. So I know that my rating is going to be lower than you guys, but I am definitely excited whenever we bring this to the table, and I feel much more empowered each time I play a faction, because then I feel like that I am really adding to my knowledge and appreciation of this game. So I'm giving it an 8 right now, but my expectation is over this year especially is it's going to grow.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to add into as I'm going over my final review here is that it's surprising that we sit down to play the game and our game nights have gone later, a lot later than they normally do, I think, because of this game. Not because of the length of the game, but because we want to dive right into another play of it. And the time really flies by while playing this game. So I've really enjoyed it. I know looking back at the first review of it 3.5 years ago, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. This time around, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 because it is just a lot to explore. And the more I have been exploring it, and the more familiarized I've been getting with all the other factions and the way the game plays, the more fun it has gotten. The asymmetry is fun. Yes, it's a high barrier to entry. Yes, there's a lot going on with it. It is a brain burner. It's definitely going to leave you tired at the end of a couple plays. But it's one that I think about a lot. It's one that I want to do more research on. It's one that I look up gameplay videos of just to kind of see what other people do. And anytime I feel like the need to explore the game more, not only at the table but also outside of the gaming realm, it's a sign of a good game to me, and I'm very glad that we revisited it. Definitely would be a little bit lower with just base game, but with the expansions, it's a 9 out of 10 for me.
Yep, with even room to grow from there for it. So from all of us at Talking Cardboard, think about Root. Maybe if somebody else in your group has played it before and knows it, then that would make it much more friendly for you to jump in. But we're liking this game a lot more this time around. So until next time, für die Otters! Bye everybody!